If I had left that room 5 minutes earlier, I might never have known the secret she left behind. No one ever told me this, how sometimes the silence of a dying person is louder than any scream. I didn't expect to be the one standing alone at her bedside, while the people who should have been there disappeared as if they never existed. But that's what happened. And when the envelope was placed in my hand, I understood. I hadn't just witnessed my mother-in-law's death. I'd been given an assignment. Her name was Evelyn Sanders, 72 years old, once a high school English teacher in New Hampshire. I called her my mother-in-law, though in the 4 years I'd been married to her son, we'd never truly been close. She was polite, distant, and at times left me feeling like every word I spoke was being judged. But in her final days, lying in a hospice room on the 3rd floor of Concord Regional Hospital, battling late-stage pancreatic cancer, I was the only one who stayed. For 3 days straight, I sat by her side, held her hand, wiped her forehead, read her poetry, while Ethan, my husband, and his sister Monica made promises and broke every single one. They never came. Not a single message, not one call, not even a lazy excuse. Evelyn died at 2:08 p.m. on a bright, quiet Thursday. Her monitor didn't beep like in the movies. It gave off one long, low tone that stretched like a thread unraveling into silence. I held her hand until it turned cold. So did my heart. A nurse entered. Julia. I remembered her because she was the only one who ever brought me tea during the wait. She bowed her head, checked the monitor, then gently placed her hand on my shoulder. "Mrs. Sanders has passed," Julia said softly, her voice barely above a breath. "I'm so sorry." I nodded, saying nothing. I had no more tears left. Julia paused, then added, "Before she passed, she asked me to give you this. Only you. Only after she was gone." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a slightly wrinkled cream-colored envelope. My name, Quinn Harper, was written on it, in firm but unsteady handwriting. I took the envelope like someone receiving a final order. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded once, yellowed with time. As I opened it, a small bronze key fell into my palm. The page contained just one sentence, written in black ink. "They never loved me. Now they'll know what it feels like to be forgotten." No address, no explanation. Just an old key and a promise that felt more like a curse. "Miss Quinn, are you okay?" Julia asked, when she noticed the color drain from my face. I folded the paper back into the envelope. "Yes, just some final thoughts, that's all." But I knew. This wasn't closure. It was the beginning of something I didn't yet have a name for. Ethan didn't call, Monica didn't text. My phone only had 2 missed calls, from the arts center where I worked as an events coordinator. I left the hospital a little after 4, carrying Evelyn's personal effects. A nightgown, reading glasses, and a novel she never finished. I sat in my car for nearly half an hour before starting the engine. The key was still in my coat pocket, warming with every passing minute. I got the call from Margaret Hale's law office that Monday morning. The assistant's voice was firm, like a summons to court. "Miss Quinn Harper, Evelyn Sanders left a will. She requested that you and 2 family members be present for the reading, tomorrow morning 9 a.m. at the office." Should I bring anything? Such clarity. That's what she said, word for word. I hung up, hand tightening around the chair's armrest. Evelyn never needed many words to chill someone to the bone. That evening, I told Ethan over a cold dinner, "You're coming with me tomorrow. Mom's will is being read." He looked up from his phone, eyebrows raised. What? What would she leave behind? Some old recliners? I slapped the spoon from his hand, the clang sharp as a slap. "You're not ashamed? She died alone. I was the only one there." Ethan exhaled like I was being dramatic. "Don't start, Quinn. Mom couldn't even remember my name sometimes, you know that." "So that's your excuse? You left her to die?" I stood, leaving my untouched stew on the table. 9 a.m. tomorrow. Margaret Hale. If you don't show, don't expect sympathy. He came, begrudging and silent. Monica arrived on time, bleach blonde hair too bright, face twisted in irritation. The first thing she muttered as she entered the office, "This better not take more than 10 minutes." Margaret Hale's office sat inside an old brick building downtown. Wooden doors, warm lighting, orderly decor. Yet the air inside was thick, like someone had just slammed the lid on a brewing storm. Margaret appeared, silver-haired, steel-eyed, a small woman with the presence of a judge. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice needing no effort to command silence. After verifying identities, she opened a leather briefcase, pulled out the will, and put on her glasses. "This is the final will and testament of Evelyn Sanders, signed March 10th of this year. I'll read it word for word." No one spoke. Monica huffed. Ethan bounced his leg. I stared at the paper, unsure if I was ready. "To Ethan, my son, I leave you my forgiveness, though you've never tried to earn it." The chair creaked as Ethan tensed. Silence followed. "To Monica, my daughter, I leave my wedding ring, the one you always admired only because it sparkled." Monica's face turned red, her fingers tightened around her purse. "To Quinn, the only one who stayed when I had nothing left to give, I leave the entirety of what remains. The house at 19 Meadow Oak Lane, all bank accounts at Union Trust, investment portfolios, insurance policies, personal belongings, and the documents stored in the cabin outside town." The room shattered like glass hit by a hammer. "What?" Monica shrieked. "She's just the daughter-in-law. They didn't even have kids." Ethan looked at me like I'd robbed a bank. "What did you do to my mother, Quinn? Manipulated her while she was dying?" I stood, voice unshaken. "I didn't do anything, except not vanish when she needed someone." Margaret tapped her silver pen on the table. "Let me be clear. Mrs. Evelyn was fully lucid when she signed this. There's a psychological evaluation, and a video, should anyone choose to contest." Ethan collapsed back into his seat, eyes hollow. Monica muttered something bitter and turned away. Margaret closed the file and slid a smaller envelope toward me. "She left this for you, said to give it only after they'd heard the will." I took it with a trembling hand. The envelope felt light as air, but inside, I knew it carried weight that would shift everything. This was only the beginning. I waited until Ethan and Monica left the law office, their footsteps thudding against the old wooden floor. Margaret Hale remained seated behind her desk, her gaze fixed on me, as if trying to predict how I would react to what came next. I opened the envelope Evelyn had left. Inside was a thick, pale yellow sheet of paper with a purple border. Her handwriting was still steady, though the pressure had clearly weakened. "Quinn, if they get angry, let them. Don't interrupt, don't explain. Just look at them as if they're invisible, the way they made me feel. I've lived too long unseen. Don't let yourself live that way too. If they kneel, smile, then walk away." I folded the note and tucked it carefully into my wallet. No need for long speeches. Evelyn was never one for many words, but each of hers cut like a thin blade. That afternoon, I returned to the small apartment in the Manchester suburbs. Ethan had gotten home before me. He sat on the couch, beer in hand, the TV on low volume. He didn't look at me when I walked in. "All the assets? Seriously?" he said before I even took off my coat. I didn't answer. "I mean, my mom left everything to you? A stranger?" His voice cracked between disbelief and anger. I set down my bag and turned to him. What stranger sat by her side until her last breath? What stranger called her every day and got ignored? He jumped up, eyes blazing. "You're trying to make me look like the bad guy? You know she didn't even call me for 6 months, right?" "She waited for you," I replied, cold as steel. "And you waited for dinner." Ethan hurled his glass to the floor. The crash was sharp, final, like the last refusal of a relationship long decayed. That night, I slept on the couch, Not because I was afraid, but because I refused to share a bed with someone who remembered his mother only when her will didn't mention his name. The next day I got a call from Margaret. Her voice was low but firm. "Monica's hired a lawyer. They've sent notice to challenge the will, claiming Evelyn was under undue influence in her final days." I wasn't surprised. "She was prepared, wasn't she?" I asked. "There's a video, a psychological assessment, and recordings." Evelyn documented every visit, every call, everything Monica said, how Ethan behaved. She anticipated this. Part of me felt chilled. The rest felt oddly reassured. Margaret asked me to come to her office the next day to hear one of the recordings. I sat across from her, fingers tightening around my purse strap as the audio began. Evelyn's voice came slow, dry, but crystal clear. "Monica came by on February 6th, stayed exactly 13 minutes, talked about her trip to Cancun, laughed when I asked about my health. When I refused to give her money, she said, 'If you die and leave nothing behind, then dying was pointless.'" Margaret stopped the playback. "I have Ethan's tapes too, if you'd like to hear." I shook my head. "I think I know enough." She nodded slowly, then added, "We're not just fighting a lawsuit. We're confronting a pattern of neglect. And Evelyn broke it." That afternoon, I drove out to the house Evelyn had left, the one at 19 Meadow Oak. I had never been inside. Evelyn once told me, "I'll give you the key when it matters." The door creaked open, hinges old and stubborn. The scent of lavender and old paper filled the air. The space inside was still but not cold. On the tea table sat a wooden box. Inside were journals, one for each year, from 1998 to 2023. The first page of the most recent one read, "My son didn't call on my birthday, 4th year in a row." Monica texted, "Send a pic of the cake, I'm busy today." Quinn brought a cake. Didn't say much, just smiled. It felt warmer than any hollow greeting. I closed the book. The hearing was tomorrow. And I was ready. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because Evelyn's words had ripped open what I once called family. Each line, each entry, scraped through old memories like rusted metal. Gone were the silent dinners and unanswered calls. What remained was the truth. I wasn't the only one they had overlooked. Valentine's Day last year, Ethan texted, "Happy Valentine's, Mom." No call, no visit, no checking in. I ate dinner alone, again. Quinn brought chocolates and flowers. She's not blood, but she's the only one who remembered. I couldn't tear my eyes away from those words. Sharp like blades, not painful, but cutting. The next morning I sat across from Ethan and Monica at the Merrimack County Courthouse. They whispered to their lawyer, pointing at me like I was some thief. Margaret arrived a few minutes late, but one look from her silenced the entire room. The plaintiffs claim that Quinn Harper manipulated Evelyn Sanders when she was most vulnerable, Monica's lawyer began, voice steady but trembling. "Evidence?" the judge asked, brows raised in skepticism. "No direct proof, but questionable behavior. Mrs. Sanders suddenly amended her will, cutting out her biological children." Margaret stood, unhurried. "Your Honor, we have an independent psychological evaluation from Dr. Mitchell, conducted 2 weeks prior to the signing of the will. It confirms full mental capacity." He handed a copy to the court clerk. "That's not all. We also have recordings." Evelyn's own voice. "Documenting Monica and Ethan's words and actions over the last 6 months of her life." The judge nodded. "Play it." Evelyn's voice rang out, thin but precise. "Ethan called yesterday. Not to check in. He needed $4,000, 0 cents, for car repairs. When I asked why he couldn't pay himself, he hung up. I felt ashamed for him." Monica flushed crimson. Then another clip. Monica stopped by, no greeting, no asking how I was, just said, Why don't you move already? Who wants to live in this dry, depressing place? I said, this is my home. He laughed. Colder than January snow? No one spoke. The entire courtroom felt frozen. These are just one of 13 recordings, Margaret said calmly, as if she'd long been acquainted with ugly truths. We can submit them all. Monica's lawyer leaned in urgently. At last, he stood. Your Honor, my client wishes to withdraw the case. The judge nodded. Case dismissed. Court costs to be paid by the plaintiff. I walked out of the courtroom in silence. Ethan followed close behind. I stopped and turned, locking eyes with him. Don't say my name like you still have the right to. He frowned. You're misunderstanding. I thought maybe we could talk. Calm down. Calm down? I let out a quiet laugh. Your mother died alone. Where were you? And me? The outsider you loved to dismiss. I was the one holding her hand until her last breath. He said nothing. I stepped closer, whispering, she saw you clearly. And now, so do I. I turned away, but I still heard him mutter behind me, you'll regret this. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. That night I sat alone in the house Evelyn once lived in, her journal open before me. The fire in the hearth glowed red. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, tapping against the old window panes like it was saying something I had always known. I wasn't abandoned. I was freed. And I was just beginning to understand it. The next morning, I left the old apartment without saying a word to Ethan. Instead, I slipped the divorce papers into an envelope, sent it to my attorney, and included a single, cold note. I will no longer be the wife of a coward. The court can handle the rest. No tears, no trembling hands, just the silence of someone too exhausted to keep compromising. The house Evelyn left behind became the first place I ever lived in without asking anyone's permission. I cleaned each room, dusted off faded photographs, wiped the mirrors as if erasing the past. In the bottom drawer of the living room bookshelf, I found another notebook. Not a journal, but an unfinished plan, a community center for local seniors. She called it Haven. There were sketches, funding notes, activity schedules. Evelyn had a clear vision, every line carefully written. And then she got sick. And then her children drifted away. I looked at those plans, then around the house. Empty, yet somehow warm. And I knew what I had to do. 3 weeks later, I filed the paperwork to establish a nonprofit, Evelyn's Haven. Margaret Hale provided legal support. Diane and Eleanor, Eleanor's old friends, helped me connect with churches, senior homes, and local sponsors. What once was considered a burden became the beating heart of a community. I still remember the first evening we opened the center. Warm lights spilled onto the porch. The scent of baked goods filled the air. Laughter rang from the small kitchen. A sound Evelyn hadn't heard in her final years. You'd be proud, Diane whispered, her eyes damp, her smile soft. I nodded. She didn't want pity, she wanted to be remembered the right way. Hung Evelina's photo, taken in her youth, standing before a classroom, right in the center of the main hall wall. Everyone who walked in would see her. But true resistance isn't just in courtrooms or wills. It's in living better, after you've been mistreated, and never looking back. Ethan called. Often. First with anger, then with remorse, then pretending to care. I made your favorite mushroom pasta, he left in a voicemail. Want to come home for dinner? I didn't respond. I just messaged my lawyer, accelerate the divorce. A week later, Monica left a message, this time, an email. I lost my job. My friends are ghosting me. Maybe you won't forgive me, but could you at least help cover this month's rent? I replied by sending a photo of the final line from Evelyn's letter. Don't forgive, let them beg, then walk away. And then I blocked them both. Haven became a refuge for others. Elderly women abandoned in nursing homes, widowers with no one left to talk to, and people like me, once made to feel like excess in our own families. I hosted book nights, community dinners, gentle yoga for seniors, and support groups for the lonely. Every activity was a quiet revolt against the loneliness Evelyn had endured. One day as I wiped down the reception counter, I saw a little girl, maybe 8, guiding her grandmother through the front door. She said clearly, "Mom told me they have the best apple pie in the city here." I froze. Not because of the pie, but because that sentence was exactly what Evelyn once wrote. I want a place people remember for simple things, not fancy, just warm enough to live in their hearts. I understood then. Sometimes resistance doesn't need shouting. You just have to live well, long enough, strong enough, until no one can ignore you. And that's what I'm doing, every single day. 3 months after the hearing, Ethan showed up at Haven one windy afternoon, holding a paper bag and wearing a laughably practiced face. I didn't invite him in, I simply kept the door half shut, just enough to hold the boundary. "I just want to talk, Quinn. Nothing more," he said, glancing behind me at the group of seniors learning to bake cookies with Eleanor. "I have nothing to say," I replied, colder than the autumn wind swirling outside. Ethan gave a forced smile. "This has all gone too far. You've won, right? Mom left you everything. I'm not asking for anything now." I crossed my arms. "You didn't come here for your mother. You came for the bank." He blinked, hesitating. I stepped out onto the porch, pulling the door closed behind me. "They're investigating those loans, Ethan. The ones your mom once co-signed when she was still lucid. After that, you extended them without her permission." "I just need time," he murmured. "A month. A few thousand to avoid foreclosure." I stared into the eyes of the man who used to be my husband. "She left everything to me because she knew where you were when she needed help. And now that you need help, I'm exactly where you left her." I walked back inside. The door closed behind me without a sound. Monica came next, 2 weeks later, with a voicemail sent near dawn, her voice trembling, almost panicked. "Quinn, I lost my job. My landlord is threatening eviction. I have no one else to call." I didn't answer. Instead, I sent a picture, the last page of Evelyn's letter, the slanted handwriting still fierce. "Don't forgive. Let them beg, and when they do, smile. Then walk away." I never imagined a handwritten sentence could be such a perfect answer. While Ethan and Monica spiraled downward, Haven quietly became the center of life in the neighborhood. People came for the classes, but stayed for the feeling. The warmth, measured not in temperature, but in being seen. One day, a local journalist came to interview me after hearing about Haven from Ms. Eleanor. She listened as I spoke about Evelyn, the neglect she endured, and the journals she left behind. Her last trace in a world that silenced her. The article was published the following week, titled, "The Forgotten Woman and the Daughter-in-Law Who Gave Her Voice Back." I received dozens of emails from abandoned children, invisible wives, and elderly people, with no one left to say their names each morning. A small publishing house in Boston reached out. "We believe your story needs to be told, not just here, but everywhere," the editor wrote. "Not because it's tragic, but because of how you turned it into something meaningful." I began writing, not for fame, but to protect Evelyn's memory from being distorted by the very people she once called family. I recounted each journal entry, every letter, every cold exchange Evelyn had with her own children. I wrote about the trial, the cabin, the rusted key she once handed me. The title was simple, "The Letter That Made Me Never Look Back." I didn't write to seek revenge. I wrote to bring closure. The book launch was held in Haven's main hall. No flowers, no stage, just hot tea, apple pie, and the people Evelyn had touched, even if only with a gentle word. She once said she wanted to start a cooking class for those who no longer had anyone to eat with. Eleanor shared. Now she has an entire center. I looked around and saw Evelyn's photo on the wall. She still smiled softly, but this time, her eyes no longer looked sad. because now everything was where it belonged. 1 year after Evelyn Sanders passed away, Haven was no longer just an old wooden house tucked in a quiet alley. It had become the heart of a whole community. Every Monday morning, the watercolor class for seniors was full. On Wednesdays, we hosted community dinners, the main dish always Evelyn's handwritten favorite. Tomato meatballs, the old-fashioned kind, not the frozen store-bought stuff. And every Sunday, I opened the hall to anyone who wanted to share a story of lost loved ones, abandoned lives, or unheard memories. No one was interrupted, no one was mocked. Every story was treated as a memory worth keeping. On the first anniversary of Evelyn's death, we hung a large mural in the entrance hall. A local artist, once Evelyn's student, painted her young, standing under the old oak tree behind the house. Beside her stood Ben, her late husband, the man Evelyn once described as the only one who looked at me like I was the most precious thing in the world. When the cover cloth fell, no one spoke, only the sound of choked breaths and hands clasping hands. "I never met her," an elderly man whispered. "But looking at this, I wish I had," Eleanor murmured beside me. If Evelyn knew she'd be painted like this, she'd pretend to be grumpy, then secretly take a photo with that old phone of hers. I laughed through the tears. She once wrote, "I don't need a name carved in stone. I just want not to disappear from the memories of those I loved." And now, Evelyn had become the reason hundreds remembered how to love properly. The letter that made me never look back became an unexpected bestseller, not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. Letters of gratitude poured into Haven, from women forgotten by their children, from sons and daughters ashamed of not being enough, from lawyers, social workers, and nurses who had watched the elderly die quietly in facilities with no visitors. An old woman in Missouri wrote, "I thought I was fading into nothing. Then I read about Evelyn, and realized there's still a way to end with dignity." A retired teacher in Oregon shared, "I printed a quote from your book and taped it to my dining table. Silence isn't weakness, it's proof we don't need recognition to keep existing." And I knew Evelyn didn't die in silence. She was living again, through every letter, every story, every place where someone was truly seen. One late summer day, I walked to the backyard. A breeze rustled the oak branches, the old wooden swing creaking like a long-forgotten whisper. I sat beneath the tree and placed a bundle of wildflowers, Evelyn's favorite, at the thickest root. "You didn't just leave me a house, a savings book, or a shocking will," I whispered. "You gave me something more valuable, the power to choose my life, and the courage not to apologize for it." Above me, the leaves shimmered in the sunlight. I was no longer someone's wife, no longer a filler at someone else's table. I was the keeper of forgotten memories. I was the voice of those once deemed unworthy. I was Quinn Harper, the survivor, the rebuilder, and the one who never looked back. Tomorrow, someone new will arrive at Haven, carrying a broken heart, a story never told. And I will sit down, pour the tea, and say, "There was a pot coming. We're here, tell it." Quinn's story isn't just about reclaiming justice from a shocking will. It's a powerful reminder that silence doesn't equal weakness, and true worth doesn't require bloodline approval. In real life, we're often hurt by those we love most. But like Quinn, anyone has the right to stand up, redraw the lines, and create a legacy from what was broken. A legacy built on courage, compassion, and the choice to never look back. What are your thoughts on Quinn's journey? Do you feel empathy, anger, or have your own perspective? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about life and family.